Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are, with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to kachava.com and use code FITNESS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code FITNESS.
This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
And you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcast.
Now part of the Evergreen Podcast Network.
All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to our podcast. So what do we got today, Tom?
Well, today we're going to be looking at probably one of the most famous, even though it's pretty recent, but definitely one of the most perplexing airplane disappearances of all time. We're looking at the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 that disappeared basically on its way from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing in, March 8th, 2014. And as you probably hear about in the news because they believe they found some debris. And so that you hear about this news recently with some other airplane crashes and disappearances. And trying to recover like the F-35 that just recently crashed, or the stealth fighter, trying to find the debris. But this one is a little bit different because it's a passenger plane. And I remember when this happened, obviously, it wasn't that long ago.
Well, yeah, it wasn't that long
ago. But it
just
but it was all over the news because, like, how does this plane just totally disappear? That's the whole point. It just disappears.
Yeah. And there's so much here to unpack. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over kind of the basic timeline of what transpired. Then we'll get into the search itself and how the search in itself kind of brings up a lot of questions and maybe some hidden agendas by various governments, which we'll get into. And then that kind of leads us into, I guess, theories of what might have happened. And we could finish up with some, hypothetical theories, because obviously some people are like, it's the aliens. No, it probably was not the aliens.
No aliens. Yeah, it's like, again, if you go and research this yourself, especially if you research on like YouTube or like Reddit, you're going to go down a rabbit hole. Like some of the things that were popping up about like black holes and like not just UFOs, aliens, black holes, that they're still alive. John Benet Ramsey was the pilot. Like you see all this like crazy stuff out there. But
yes, and it's funny because there's right. I know. Well, that's what happens when you can't explain it, right? Like if you can't explain something with rational thought, you tend to go into the irrational. Well, we don't, but some people do.
Who needs rational thought anymore? Facts, rational thought. Come on, it's fact. I know. It's 2023.
I know. You're right. We could just
you can just make things up.
But they say that this remains one of the greatest aviation mysteries in history. I don't know. I feel like there's so many aviation mysteries in history that I wouldn't say this is the greatest one. However,
it's the largest, I guess you could say, right? I mean, obviously, people always wonder what happened to Amelia Earhart, which has been in the news again recently, too. They're thinking they found some more information on her. She's probably, I'd say, one of the most famous ones. But this was definitely the big...
But not 239
people. It's 239 people, and it's recent. It's one thing if something happens in the 1930s, you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense how a plane is lost. This is 2014. These things has, transponders, and it did change a lot of stuff with aviation too.
Yep. No, we'll talk about that as well. Like I said, 239 people on board just disappeared. This is very much like Lost. Like when the show Lost came out, this is
never
very
watched
much reminiscent of that.
Never watched.
Never watched Lost?
I never watched Lost. I never watched Survivor. I only watched like 4 episodes of Seinfeld. Like I don't know.
Wait, stop right there. You only watched 4 episodes of Seinfeld?
Maybe a few more.
Yeah, you watched WWE and you watched Law and Order. I know.
I watched The Office. I watched Parks and Rec. I've seen those shows.
Well, yeah, because if you don't, you're like culturally.
So I've seen. I know Seinfeld. I definitely know the episodes, but
Well, needless to say, Lost, as everybody or most of people out there know, is about a plane that just kind of disappears, and there is obviously different surreal and not really realistic or grounded in reality explanations to it, but. The guy of the newest TV show, the producer of the newest TV show, Manifest. I don't know if you saw this.
I've heard that. I've heard that show. Yeah.
Yeah, like lands, and it's apparently like it was gone for like an hour, but really the people were gone for like 5 years or something like that. So the guy pitched that idea to various networks right before 2014, like by 2013, early 2014. Everyone rejected it. Every network rejected it. And then after March 8th, 2014, he started getting phone calls back, and people are like, all right, yeah, we'll pick this show up.
Well, yeah, because now it's like topical. It's like it becomes, art imitating life, and that's a whole different thing.
So let's kind of get into more or less what happened here. What do we know?
All right, well, it was a Boeing 777, like we said, with 227 passengers and 12 crew members. And this search was huge. It went all the way from the Indian Ocean, west of Australia, Central Asia. We've been looking for this thing for obviously years. But the flight takes off at 12:41 local time, so it reaches its cruising altitude, and it reports in and it's transmitting its data like it's number two. But the last transmission was actually at 1:07 a.m. So not that long after it takes off, and it was switched off. And so that's they said that was kind of rare. You don't always see that, but nothing. Again, they're not thinking anything horrible with it. And the last voice communication from the crew occurred at 1:19 and 1:21. That's when when the plane's transponder started communicating with air traffic control was just switched off. And that's right around when it was entering Vietnamese airspace over the South China Sea. You do have some Malaysian military and civilian radar did start to track the plane on its own because it's flying in their airspace right around 2:22 a.m. So they know it was still in the air, at least at that time.
Yep. So this is where it gets a little bit, not conspiracy theory-esque, but confusing in a sense, because there's routine communication throughout the whole thing, right? So the flight initially follows this planned route where it's going, if it's going to Beijing, it's going like northeast. So imagine going up and to the right if you're looking at a map. And it's flying over the South China Sea between Malaysia and Vietnam. And at 1:21, everything's going well. It's going in the right direction. And then like a 1:21 beep, it just disappears from radar screens. And transponder shut down. This is what kind of was revealed later on. In order for the transponder that sends this information back and forth and communicates with the towers, in order for that to stop working, it has to be physically manually disabled inside the cockpit, which means someone in the cockpit turned off its like GPS signal.
It wasn't like a failure or anything like that. It wasn't
it was
mechanical failure. Someone actually to switch it off. And that's also what was concerning, because also at this time they determined that around that time it started turning west, so it deviates to
completely.
So the transponder,
direction.
And you can see this on like the videos and stuff. So the transponder is switched off and it starts turning west, basically just flying over the Strait of Malacca and the sea. So it's just flying there, and like that's really not
like west. It went from going northeast.
It just does this like huge hard turn, and then it's just going open ocean, and it's lost from there. They think it just flew probably until 8:10 in the morning, where they probably eventually ran out of fuel.
Yeah, so this is interesting too, because they're flying for hours, right? So it disappears from the radar. It makes a significant unexpected deviation, right, from intended flight path. It does communicate with the satellite, as you mentioned, and what essentially happens is the Malaysian Flight 370 communicates through satellite pings. It's like a British telecommunications company that Intermast, I think it's called, Inmarsat. That's what it's, Inmarsat. And what it does is they're called handshakes. It basically, the plane like beeps and sends these intermittent data points that indicates where it is, its approximate location. And it continues doing this for like 6 more hours. So even though it's not communicating with anybody, this particular satellite is like beeping it and tracking where it's going through these handshakes.
And what I think makes some people kind of with the conspiracy whatever, is that during this time too, like they knew it changed course, but no one was really trying to make contact with the plane either, which I thought was kind of strange. Like, why are they not saying you're off course? What's the matter? You're off course. What's the matter? That wasn't taking place. Some people write about it. I believe they made notes, but no one tried to communicate necessarily with the plane. From what I saw.
Well, did you know? Well, this is what I was reading about this. The reason for that is because by communicating with the plane, a lot of these Vietnam and all these other nations that are in that region would actually basically tell the world their radar capabilities. And to this day, a lot of those nations were very reluctant to even admit the fact that they were like pinging. There's a ping of this
because
plane.
They don't want to admit that they're following civilian aircraft and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Which gets to another Malaysian flight we'll talk about, I'm sure, later on.
Well, yeah, later on, yeah. But that's the key here. It's like you have, and eventually when the joint investigation team comes in, that's the big key. A lot of these nations are like Thailand, right? You have Malaysia, obviously, even China and Vietnam. They're like, we don't really want to tell anybody where we picked up this plane on our satellites, because that will basically showcase our military capabilities. And therefore, we're not going to do that. And Malaysia itself actually has been criticized a lot, which we'll get into later. The sheer fact that some people believe that they're not even releasing the right information. And there's some things that might suggest that, which we will get into as well. But basically what ends up happening is the plane disappears. And initially, they had enough fuel more or less for like 5.5 hours. And we know based on these pings that it was flying for like 6.5 hours into the Indian Ocean, just flying. So highly likely, the belief is that it simply just ran out of fuel and dropped into the Indian Ocean.
Yes, somewhere. Right? They're not sure. They still don't know exactly where, but they believe it was in the remote part of the Indian Ocean, about 1,500 miles southwest of Australia. That's basically where it was. And they don't think anyone on board, survived. But there's all these
Yeah.
theories, obviously. But they're just, and once the plane crashes, they don't think anything, anyone survived.
And there's also questions on how does that go? Like, how does the plane crash too? That's a whole nother issue. Well, first of all, most of the people that were out of the 200, something passengers, because there was 12 crew members, 153 out of the 227 passengers were Chinese.
Yeah.
So China's the main country that's like
pushing to find out what's going on.
Exactly. You need to tell us what's going on here. Some people are saying that the way it crashed, and again, some people, you have scientists that kind of do this for a living, but based on, and we'll get into in a little bit, based on the debris that they did find,
which took a long time to find. That's the thing.
Like years.
Yeah,
like 2 years.
They didn't find any debris until July 29th, 2015. So they believe they did hear some pings that they believe was they had transponded the end of its battery life on April 8th. After that, they have absolutely nothing from this flight until July 29th, 2015. So just keep that in mind.
Well, because the ping, that's another thing that's kind of been changed since that. So
they have longer battery life now, right?
Exactly. Those lasted 30 days, right? Is it 30 days?
Yeah, something like that, 30 days, yeah, give or take.
Give or take, and then the battery dies and you no longer hear like a little radar beep. So now they're started installing better batteries to give you more time to find, because normally within 30 days you find it.
Yeah, but
that's what's weird about this.
But it's weird too. But yeah, well, because they just had no idea really where it was. So if you're just stretching these remote parts of the Indian Ocean, like normally if a plane goes down, it's going to go down somewhere by land. So you can kind of narrow it down where it's going to be. If it goes on over water, you could believe they're trying to, fly it. But this totally went away from any land when they did that hard turn west.
Oh, yeah, and it was over the Indian Ocean. But the one guy that I saw said that based on the debris they did find, which isn't a lot, by the way, the plane had to have hit the water vertically. So it just had to like go down, straight down, because if it hit at any other angle, it would have broken into bigger pieces. Like they said, it would have just been all over the place. So the plane highly likely had to just like literally just fly and just nosedive straight down into the Indian Ocean.
And they did confirm that it was from that. They found about 26 pieces of debris by like Mozambique, South Africa, in that general area.
I mean, just, think how far, right, the currents took it in the grand scheme of things. First things first, Malaysian government, prime minister goes on TV, says, all right, these guys are presumed lost and presumed dead. Initially, they're like, well, the last official transmission we have, they were right on course over the South China Sea when they were still going northeast. And that's kind of where the first, response to try to find him starts, until Malaysia's like, well, actually, they kind of veered off to the left. Like, they don't right away say
that doesn't come out for later on. Yeah, like I said before, the governments are kind of wary about giving too much information on here.
So they're like, well, the last recording thing, they were in the middle of the South China Sea heading northeast direction. So that's where we're going to start looking. And in reality, they were not even remotely close to that. Completely opposite direction. So then that does come out. Like, okay, yeah, they did veer off. So that kind of adds a whole nother layer to this mystery. And they are presumed lost. So now let's start the investigation and the search. There are some reported sightings, obviously, right? You have in March 19th, 2014, CNN reported that there were witnesses, specifically fishermen, that basically saw an airliner. One guy said he claimed he saw low-flying
flames
aircraft
coming out, right?
Yeah, it was inflamed. Then another person, same thing. It was actually someone that was sailing in a sailboat, some British woman, and she said that she caught an aircraft on fire going really, really low. Nothing has been corroborated since then. But the search and rescue efforts launched right away. This is, to this day, the most expensive rescue efforts for a downed plane.
Yeah, because they're looking, like I said, in the middle of the ocean. And actually, China and Malaysia and Australia, they call off the search in January of 2017. Then an American company by the name of Ocean Infinity received permission by the Malaysian government to continue searching. They're doing underwater drone submarines and stuff like that. Yep. They searched until May 2017. I think they're trying to get permission again with some new evidence. They want to continue to look in a different part.
Well, the last one I saw is that the United States company, so Malaysia said, look, we'll pay you if you find something. But apparently the U.S. company had found something last time that they have not released to the Malaysian government. And the Malaysian government's like, look, we're not going, like right now in 2023, they're like, we're not going to send you or allow you back to look for this unless you give us the information that you are holding back from us. So God knows what they found. The American company's not telling the Malaysian government.
Yeah, it's really weird. There's all this like secrecy. Like if you have information, just
weird, right?
Just release it. It's also a lot of the families are very mad at Malaysian government. They don't trust them.
Oh yeah.
They're saying they're just not
Oh yeah.
releasing information that should be released or not telling us what happened to their loved ones. It's got to be horrible to think about that. You know?
Yeah, but at the same time, like the Malaysian government, the total thing right now, the cost of this search
Oh, it's
already
super
has been
expensive. Yeah.
155 million,
Yeah.
right? And out of the 155 million, 60% came from Malaysia. Australia did 30 something, and China did like 10%, even though it's the Chinese people that are the most upset about this,
Yeah.
wanting to know what happened. With regards to what the Malaysian government is doing or not doing, so few things. One is the massive belief that the government is hiding some information that is obviously covering this up, but some theories suggest that the Malaysian government or its officials may have like political motives, right? Hiding whatever they know. That could range from protecting the reputation of the airline, which, as we're going to get into in a little bit, literally bankrupt. The country's aviation industry as a whole, trying to avoid a potential embarrassment for the fact that they saw this thing go completely left and didn't do anything about it. There's also claims that the Malaysian government might be withholding information about the flight due to national security concerns. Speculation has centered on the possibility of like sensitive military intelligence activities that were occurring in the region where the plane disappeared. Again, we don't know. Then there's some critics accuse the Malaysian government that aviation authorities are just incompetent and negligent in handling any initial search, which kind of screwed it up going forward. And then there's the lack of transparency from the government,
That's
which
probably
we're
the
going
big
to
one.
get
Yeah.
into. That's probably a big one. Well, last one, I guess, is the concealing pilot involvement, because this one's big.
Yeah. Well,
So you want to get into that,
Yeah, so
right?
this one basically goes with, again, they don't know why it went down, right? So there's a lot of speculation. They really don't, when I say they, authorities, they really don't think there was any sort of, there was talk about maybe mechanical failure, or there was a depressurization of the cabin, right? And everyone passed out, and it just, then
That's
that's
what I thought. It passed out and autopilot just went left.
just went left, and then that just goes. But there's also a lot of, they don't believe it could have been hijacking, only because like no one ever claimed responsibility for it. And why would you just fly to the southern Indian Ocean? It makes no sense, to do something like that. And they know the signals most likely had to be switched off from inside the aircraft. That's why the speculation was a lot of times it was like suicide by one of the crew, particularly maybe the captain. And this all comes out because in 2016, New York Magazine did a report on the captain, which you're not going to put his name, but basically what they found out is that in his at-home flight simulator, which is like this
The FBI figured this out.
They went to his home and found out in this flight simulator, he'd flown pretty much very similar.
That same course.
That exact course, just over the Indian Ocean less than a month before the plane vanished. And it closely matched the final path of the airline. Like, why are you practicing that flight on this at-home flight simulator?
Exactly.
Doesn't really make much sense. And then they start looking into his personal life and see he was having marital problems, things of that nature. Now, they can't prove anything. His family members say no, he would never do something like this. He wasn't that nature. But
yeah, the Microsoft Flight Simulator X program, which a lot of people use to like practice flying, the FBI that recovered these, there were deleted data points. By the way, he deleted those flights from the program, but nothing is really deleted. Especially if you have the FBI working on it. They basically found point records of the airplane's altitude, speed, direction of flight, other perimeters at the given moment that were identical to what we know the plane was traveling towards.
If nothing else, is just unbelievably coincidental. Because it was such a remote place in the Indian Ocean, so to just deviate that much and be in that right around that same spot, it just, I don't know. Like,
a little fishy.
You can see pun intended. You can see how that could be something that's going to raise a lot of red flags and raise some theories. But again, it's impossible to prove. It's impossible to really know.
Well, yes, but this is also where you have the red flag for the Malaysian government, because when this comes out, the New York Times basically announces that they have this information. The Malaysian government and officials are like, no, that's not real. No, that's not true. That didn't happen. And then the FBI findings are later confirmed, and like, no, that actually
they said no, it didn't happen. Like, no, this is what happened. Yeah, so it's kind of like.
And that takes credibility away from the Malaysian government.
And now they're just not going to believe really anything that is basically said. But there was also talk that it was shot down, but there's no evidence of like a missile or anything like that. But there was some talk about that.
Well, besides being shot down, there's a few things here. One, there was a lot of cargo. Did you see that it had a lot of lithium-ion batteries on board that were being brought over? And
planes purposely don't do that anymore, yeah.
Exactly, because they said that they get really hot if any change in temperatures or anything else. The lithium-ion batteries are supposedly extremely dangerous, and this particular plane was actually carrying a whole lot of lithium-ion batteries, which can very easily cause fire. Which again, this has happened in other flights. They were mostly air. I mean, they were all air cargo
Cargo,
aircraft.
yeah, they don't usually, yeah, but again, and I get that, and this obviously can happen, but then that doesn't explain how the transponder goes off.
Yes, that is still the key.
Like that's what key is, what makes it, and why it veered off so much. If there was a explosion, the plane wouldn't fly for 6 hours after an explosion.
True.
Right? You would think.
No, you're right. It is fishy. There's no question about it. And there's also a couple other things. You saw that there's 2 Iranian guys that had fake passports that were on the plane.
Yeah, they don't believe they did anything, but yeah, they are now believe they were asylum seekers. They believe, so they did have that. But yeah, there was talks that the plane was hijacked and redirected. Idea that the plane cracked and fell apart because of like faulty construction, or pilot sabotage. There's some people believe that it went into a second Bermuda Triangle. They were abducted by aliens, sucked into a black hole. That's actually, people believe that the plane just flew up to the moon, and the people are kept in a secret moon base up there.
Yeah, they're hanging out with Elvis.
I don't know why how that one suddenly happened. But.
One of the hijackings, you said hijacking and diversion and stuff. I mean, obviously political terrorist motives, but this one's kind of interesting, is that this was a cyber hijacking.
Yeah.
That someone is just messing around and basically, because I mean, that is possible.
Which would be terrifying, which is terrifying.
But it's possible, which is what makes it crazy. But that's some hacker literally remotely controlled and hijacked this entire. They turned off the transponder and they hijacked this plane and just basically played around with it like they were playing Microsoft, flight simulator, and just flew it out for just for giggles.
Yeah, then they just ran out of gas.
Then there's the passenger hijacking. Again, there's some theories about the crew members, some being Iranians and not having real passports. But as you said, that was one guy was like 19, one was 29. They had no bad records. Then there's also government involvement, alleged involvement of government agencies or military organizations from various countries, really. The speculated that there was like hidden agendas or secret operations. Maybe there was somebody on that flight that we don't know about that was being moved. One is like kind of also as crazy as you were saying to fly the moon, but they actually landed on some remote island or base.
Yeah, I saw that one quite a bit. They landed on this base, but I don't know. They never said why they landed there, just that they landed on this base. It was an American base, right? Wasn't it an American base?
Yes. That it's on some base and they're going through some tests or some kind.
Yeah, but why take a civilian aircraft? I mean, I get it, but like sometimes the most simplest solution is to answer.
But it's just weird. The guy literally went left. Like if you look at a map on this plate, he was just like, "Nah, I'm gonna go that way," and turn off any communication, and then just disappear. I don't know. I think it's a little crazy. Since then, a lot of different things have happened. One, the transponders rather have been updated. They're basically trying to create these tamper-proof circuit breakers inside the plane.
So you can't shut it off, yeah.
Exactly, but the pilots are against this. They're like, no, I need to be able to shut it off. It's like they want this autonomy, and they're still going back and forth about trying to really come up with the perfect solution. Flight recorders. They're saying that the flight recorders need to have longer than 30-day battery life. So underwater locator beacons, the ULBs, the pingers as they call them, we need longer than 30 days. Clearly, we're having a hard time finding these things. So going forward, this needs to last longer. So that's like talking about more, lithium-ion batteries on there.
But remember, Malaysian Airlines kind of goes under shortly after this.
Yeah, this is important to know.
Because just a few months...
It's a two-punch.
Yeah.
It's a two-punch.
On July 17th, 2014, Malaysian Air Flight 17 is actually shot down. That they know what happened. It's shot down by the Russian Federation, by a anti-aircraft missile barrage, where it actually flies over the airspace. This is during the early Ukrainian war in Crimea. Yeah, it gets shot down there. And this is different. They actually know who shot it down. Those people are, I believe, found and actually put on trial in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah, and this is only months later. And more people died in this one. Same plane, but more people. And that was basically more or less the beginning of the end for the Malaysian.
They were already losing money before this. It just also people got upset because when you lose a plane, the transponders, everything that's one of those things. But a lot of the other airliners in this area were purposely not flying that close to the Russian-Ukrainian border because they were just like worried. Because they were saying, "Oh no, military radar that can tell the difference between a commercial airline or a military airliner." Yeah, and they're like, "Yeah, really modern ones can, but a lot of the anti-aircraft, radars used at that time in this war, because they were used by like rebels or used by people on this different sides. Like they weren't advanced enough to really between a commercial airliner and a military airliner. So if they're not sure, they were just going to shoot them down. A lot of things are automated too. It picks up a plane, it's going to fire its missile.
A lot of the people that were using the Malaysian Airlines were actually Chinese citizens. And since these two events, massive boycotts Actually, to the extent that a lot of different Chinese ticketing agencies to this day just basically discontinued selling airline tickets to Malaysia. Like, there's just no point. Large Chinese travel agencies basically reported a 50% drop in tourists compared to the same period like years before. China was the third largest source of visitors to Malaysia prior to the disappearance of Flight 370. And it just basically plummets down. They're not going there anymore. In fact, flights by 2015, flights from Malaysia to China had to be canceled because there just wasn't enough people to get on to not even fill a plane. Like it was like 2 people that went, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to make this flight. So they started canceling flights. Now, Malaysia Airlines itself, a few things. Obviously, it eventually becomes taken over by the government. The government has to protect or save this company. It is given like 110 million from insurance companies so they can start paying off these people, these family members. And that really puts them in a kind of a slump, financial slump, which then you have the government has to step in and basically save the company. But in 2017, Malaysia Airlines announced that they would be the first airline to sign up for this new service that would track its airplanes anywhere in the world using orbiting satellites. So it's almost like giving up autonomy and like it's almost like it's our flight pattern. But now you're giving that up. Like, no, world satellites could track us. We're cool with
Yeah,
that.
they have to, in case something like this happens again. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'm in an airplane, I would like to be know that it's being tracked on radar, so it's going the right way, or I don't know.
It's just crazy how many things go wrong. It is interesting that when you start thinking about it, like it's still a safe means of travel. Airplane crashes, as scary as they are, it's nothing compared to car crashes. That happens so much more.
That's what.
I mean,
Well, and there's a lot of planes up there. If you ever, just look at the number of planes flying in the sky, you can like look at the image. It's crazy. Like some of the things are just blocked out because there's so many planes up there. But yeah, they are still. That's why it's so big news, though. Also, when something like this happens, particularly if one just vanishes. And that's what happened with this Malaysian Flight 370. It's not so much that the plane crashed and the loss of life. That's horrible. But it's also like you're not going to know what happened to it. And you're probably never really going to know what totally happened to it because they still only found just debris. There's so much of this plane that was not found.
So let's talk about some of the newest things we got going here, because one of the things that has been studied extensively, because like I said, they did find parts of this plane, smaller parts, like part of a wing, here or there, like a step, the stairs, like nothing big, but they found little things. But right now, I just read recently about these barnacles.
Yes.
Marine like crustacean, crusta ocean thingies, whatever. Basically, they're like
they grow usually something that's in water.
Yeah, like shell, kind of think of like shells like growing on things. And the parts of planes, that were washed up had these barnacles growing on them. And scientists have developed methods for reconstructing the drift of the ocean debris based on how these barnacles grew on these pieces of plane, which I think is awesome. Like they could figure out like more or less what direction, depth, right, these pieces came from by studying how these barnacles grew on them. The more they study these barnacles, the more it'll like give them like a GPS signal. I mean, who does this? Whose job is that? I think that's awesome. Like this barnacle grew to the left a little bit at this degree.
They're able to tell so much.
Discoloration. Yeah. So anyway, we're still finding new things.
Yeah, there's a report a couple of weeks ago that came out that that they believe the plane was found in the Cambodian jungle.
Cambodian jungles.
Yeah, so that's something that I saw on like Reddit and stuff like that. But there's still so little of the plane that was found. There's a couple like pieces of the wing and stuff like that, cabin piece. They got to find like they've never found the transponder, the black box, which is supposed to be a recording. Yeah. They'll know exactly what happened if they find that black box.
I think that we're pretty much done. One thing is this happened in 2014, so it's almost 10 years ago. And when you start studying like what is history, usually they say for something to be history, it needs to have 10 years, right, of like maturity in a sense, so you could look back at it. So I guess this is still considered current events.
Yeah, but it's also history because looking back at it, there's not that much more that's found out.
That is
like
true.
You can look back at it, but what do they really know? There's not much they know 10 years later that they didn't know then. At least that's not what's released to the public,
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do they know? They know.
Wow, who's they?
And, I don't know.
And what are they?
Now we sound like conspiracy theorists.
That's not this podcast. There's plenty of those out there.
No,
but we try to do facts here. But yeah, what happened? Who knows? Like, no one's really going to know. The pilot could have done something. There could have been some sort of mechanical failure that led to cabin pressure. Maybe it was aliens.
Well, what we're gonna leave you guys with is who turned off the
transponder. That's the thing they have to do.
Transponder.
If it can only be turned off from the cockpit, that has to be some person that got into the cockpit or was in the
Exactly.
cockpit, turned it off. And I think
Da-da-da-da.
if you can find out, if we ever find out what happened to the transponder, that can lead to some other clues. But again, I don't think we're doing any groundbreaking search or conclusions by coming to that idea, you know?
But that is what we're going to leave our listeners with. So you go, whether you're conspiracy theorists or not, we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in once more to our podcast. We do appreciate it. We were mentioned on NPR. Like, that's kind of crazy, Tom.
Yes. Well,
That was kind of
they
crazy.
mentioned our name,
right?
Not our names, but the name of the podcast.
Well, our podcast.
So shout out and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was really nice. Yeah. But anyway, so thank you so much, guys, for tuning in once more. If you need to find us, you can find us at www.historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. Please make sure you guys follow us on any social media. Make sure you click that like or subscribe button. Make sure you leave us a comment. All those things are greatly appreciated. And tell your friends about us if you enjoy this podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next week.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.